Look what I got here. Hey, where are the white women at?
We had a sneak preview of it at the AFCO Embassy on Wilshire Boulevard, and the audience loved it.
Has anybody got a dime? I don't know.
But Mr. Ashley, who ran all of Warner Brothers, and when the movie was over, took me by the scruff of the neck, threw me into the manager's office, handed me a legal pad and a pencil, and said, "Take these notes."
Sir,
what is it?
yes, if you will just sign this, Governor.
I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Ashley. Yes, sir." And he said, "No farting." I said, "Oh, it's out. It's out. You can't punch a horse." It's out. It's out. You can't beat up an old lady.
Ow! Have you ever seen such cruelty?
So when he left, I crumpled up all my notes. Callie was with me, John Callie, God bless it. And way across the manager's office was a wastepaper basket. I hit the wall, hit into the basket, and Callie said, "Good filing."
It seems that every time there's a discussion about an older comedy, the conversation quickly shifts to how it can never be made today.
It's simply too vulgar for the American public.
You gone berserk. Can't you see that man is a nit?
And perhaps no film better matches that description than Mel Brooks' hilarious western, Blazing Saddles.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
And while this sentiment may or may not be true, one thing certainly is. Even back in 1974, it almost wasn't made at all.
Son, you're on your own.
In fact, Brooks even told the team writing it to
Right? The wackiest, the most insane. It'll never be made. This is going to be crazy. Never be made.
Doggone near lost a $400 handcart.
But it turned out that crazy was exactly what he needed. When producer Michael Hertzberg fell in love with the script, he not only was willing to give Brooks a final cut clause, but
it was such a crazy movie, I could do anything I wanted.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
like fourth wall breaks,
We had, instead of background music, there was one point I wanted foreground music. It had never been done. I wanted Count Basie to actually be on the desert.
or using his experience in the Army to create the first ever fart scene in film.
I loved being in the Army. I loved being a corporal. And the food was wonderful. I loved beans. They didn't like me. I ate a lot of beans. I used it later in Blazing Saddles. Remember the campfire scene?
In fact, the governor is even named Le Pitoman as an homage to the famous French flatulist of the same name.
The mother-in-law.
And while this humor, considered crude for the time, was sure to affect the film's reputation with critics, Mel Brooks never really cared about their opinions.
If I said to myself, what are the critics going to think about this? I never would have had the guts to do all of the outrageous, foolish, stupid things that I did with Blazing Saddles.
Are we black?
But unfortunately for him, in order to get the film released, he would still have to get the studio's approval. And that didn't exactly go as planned.
We finished Blazing Saddles. I do a kind of rough / fine cut. I show it in a screening room to 12 executives. Picture comes to an end, nothing. Quiet. Sitting there, lights come up, quiet, 12 executives. It's pretty rough. For about 10 minutes, it's silent. Nobody talks. I was sitting there 10 minutes.
Eventually, they came to the conclusion that the film could never get a nationwide release. It would never make it out of the Los Angeles, New York, or Chicago markets.
He said just the words,
Laws in gain!
just that will stop this movie from going beyond these 3 cities. You know, and there was that kind of talk. They weren't going to release the picture because it was so bizarre, so wild.
Well, how many days you have left, Joey? They lose me right after the bunker scene.
But that wasn't enough to stop Mel Brooks. He strongly believed the film could be a hit with audiences, and where the studio claimed the film was too vulgar for the general public, Mel Brooks knew that
They are vulgar. They'll love it.
And so, he went behind the producers' backs and set up a private screening for nearly 300 people. And it turned out his belief in the audience's reaction was severely underestimated.
Right from the Frankie Lane singing, the titles with the Warner Brothers burning away with the arrows, it was thunder. I mean, you never heard laughs like that in your life. And that little tiny shoebox of a theater, it was screams, yelling. People were running up and down. People were banging each other, smacking each other with laughter rolling in the aisles. It was incredible.
And that was all it took for the studio to quickly reverse their decision.
He said, well, everybody is talking about it. So I'm going to do a pretty good general release.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
It was the biggest hit Warner Brothers had that year.
Somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes.
Blazing Saddles was one of a kind. I mean, it'll stand for all times as a monumental American film comedy.
And that is in no small part thanks to the film's message. Because while it's easy to view the film as simply a vehicle for fart humor and boob jokes, what really makes the film great is what drives it in the first place.
I love an engine underneath the comedy that says something.
The engine that drove Blazing Saddles was hatred of the black. It was race prejudice. Without that, the movie would not have had nearly the significance, the force, the dynamism, and the stakes that were contained in the film.
And while Mel Brooks certainly took a different approach to convey his message, he knew if the film held back at all, then the message would get lost.
It's purposeful. It has grit. It has truth and grit. And you can't shower people with truth and grit if you're going to be careful about stepping out of the lines. You got to step outside the lines.
And while many filmmakers may or may not be willing to do this today, one thing is certain. If Mel Brooks had listened to the studio's input, two things would have happened.
First of all, the movie would have been 12 minutes long.
I got an idea that'll slow him down to a crawl.
Secondly, it would have been a big disappointment.
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen.
I'm Luke.
Oh, shit.
All right, you caught me.
Thanks for watching.
I'm working for Mel Brooks. Not in the face.